All right, so here I was at a Chicago, there's a bridge in Chicago. And I think that all of us would agree that if you look at this particular image, and if you were there, you would look at all the reflections, okay? But I was looking at all the reflections and thinking they're very abstract. I couldn't get a clean reflection. I think most of us may have laid down on the ground and shot upwards, but it's all warping, doesn't look that great. We can get our lens close to the reflective surface, which of course makes the reflection more vivid, but then the faces were warped, it didn't look right. And I'm thinking, well, how else can I use this particular texture and surface? So I'm thinking, well, obviously we can just get someone away from the background and that beautiful warping could create a beautiful texture in the background. So I grabbed my ice light. For those of you who don't know, I actually invented the ice light. It's a cylindrical base LED light. It's a glorified lightsaber. I grew up with Star Wars like most people and loved that idea. But anyway, so this was done with the ice light. And I took the shot. Nothing fancy, nothing incredible, but you would say that it has a bit of a cinematic look and a feel. So that texture in that environment gave me the idea that that should be in the background and not so obvious, not so vivid. But maybe what most of us would not have done is decide to flick that white balance to tungsten, which turns daylight into blue, which now makes you feel like this could have been shot, let's say a promo shot for Blade Runner or something like that. So that's the idea, is that many of us stick to the standard way of doing things week after week. We tend to shoot the same way, expecting a different result. And of course, if you do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, that's a definition of insanity, right? So we can't be insane. We should look at an environment and understand how to use it. Now, I've got to admit, when I started professionally, even as a hobbyist, whenever I saw a great location, I would walk up to it. I would always get my couples against it. So now I'm often getting them away from the actual wall, away from that tree, away from that fountain, and picturing everything out of focus. And the cool thing is you sort of just squint in your environment and you get an idea of what it looks like out of focus. Then I thought, well, look, let's not waste the actual moment. Whenever I'm photographing, let's say for a wedding, I'll photograph the guy, bring in the girl, take them as a couple, bring the guy out, then photograph the girl. Now I've got 3-4 spreads of a wedding album. So then we added the girl, and I thought, how cool would it be to get this strong lighting and split lighting on his face. Split lighting is where you illuminate one side of the face and not the other, often considered very masculine. And then that light bounces off his face and gives that beautiful glow here. So he gets that harsh masculine lighting and she gets that really soft, beautiful lighting as well. And of course I kept that daylight white, the tungsten white balance that turns daylight into blue. And again, it gives us this beautiful look and feel. Now, watch what all I do is in camera, change my crop and how much more dramatic it actually looks. Isn't that cool? Something a little bit different that most of us perhaps we may not try. We might always go safe, go wide, go safe. My suggestion to you is if you're shooting for a client, do what you have to do what you want to do. Make the client happy, like let's say make sure the parents are happy who are traditional, and then you can go play and do what you want and have some fun afterwards. So here's Joe illuminating the guys with the ice light there, and that sort of shows us the behind the scenes. Then what I thought of, let's do like a groomsman kind of shot, and again, this is using the tungsten white balance. And of course you can do this after the fact. If you're shooting raw, you can change the white balance after the fact. But often when you rely on that, you just don't do it. If you do it in camera, it prompts you when you're converting your files from RAW to JPEG and you're correcting them, it actually prompts you to actually see it straight away. And again, being able to look at that environment and maybe use your groomsmen in a very different way. So we're training our mind now to see the environment and look at bad locations and work out what to do with them. Now, where do you think I photographed here? I mean, there's an arrow on the ground telling you where I'm going to photograph. You can see that skylight above there. This is an ordinary car park. And then you've got the arrow right there. Now, what I'm looking for, the creative trigger here was, I'm looking for a little pocket of light. So if I see a glow of light on the ground, I know that basically if someone's standing there, they're going to get this beautiful pocket of light on their faces. So I need an excuse to bring their face up to the light to actually get that shot. So what excuse could I give? What do you do naturally when you're pointing your face upwards? Because after all, if we're shooting a wedding or portrait session or something like that, we're directing our couples most of the time, but my style is I like to direct my couples in a way that appears natural, like this could have happened on its own. So what I did was I tilted her face and chin up, and then we ended up getting this shot in this environment. So let's say, for example, your limo driver just drops you off under a car park. on the way to the reception, you could squeeze in another spread of a wedding album by simply photographing on the way to the reception venue, which is only 30 feet away. And that's what I'm saying is tilt the face, chin up. We're basically photographing on the short side of the face, often referred to as the shadow side, the short side, the narrow side. I call it the sexy side, and we get that shot. In the same vein, I mean, again, we're shooting here with a fluorescent light on the rooftop of a garage, and I saw this girl had this incredible cheekbones, and I'm like, well, there's no better way to bring out cheekbones than a light from above. And of course, there were shots where they're looking up to the light, so we've got catch lights in the eyes, but I like the idea of making it look more mysterious and having these beautiful shadows on her face and on her cheekbones. And then, of course, again, we give her reasons and excuse to bring her chin up. And I love the fact we kept that little hint of highlight on her cheek that just separates her. But again, the environment told me what to do. The light's up above. What excuse can I have to bring someone's face upwards? And all I did now for the next shot was change my angle. And again, what do? You put your chin up. Maybe the girl's a little bit shorter. She's kissing. She brings her face up. And then now we get that kind of a shot. Pretty cool.
I love what you said earlier about shooting for the client and then shoot for yourself, because it feeds both needs. So if you feed your clients, then that's your business. That's how you're going to make a living. But then you feed yourself, and that's your soul. So you can keep on going. It helps to prevent burnout. And these locations that you're shooting in, like under the bridge, where it's just nothing, and especially those last few that you showed with the garage, because isn't it crazy how these are just ugly locations, like a supermarket parking lot? And so a lot of times, you clients are like, well, where are we going to do our portraits? Where are we going to do our portraits? And Jerry will often say, you just have to trust me. I'm always going to look for the light. So he educates them from the very beginning to say, we're just going to walk around and I'm going to constantly be looking for the light, so that when Jerry does show up at these locations to photograph in a supermarket garage, they don't have an issue with it, and then they trust him and end up with these beautiful portraits.
And now, why do I challenge myself to go to these locations? Really, it's because they're different. In other words, if I went to the same park, the same hotel, then it's going to just be common. So often I'll go to a church and just do a 360 around the church on the same block, or as I'm driving to a potential nominated location, I might in fact actually stop 3 times as I'm driving there. So I'll tell a limo driver, hey, follow me on the way to this location. If I stop, you stop, that means I want to shoot here. And that's why, because I'm photographing at so many different spots, then I'm getting diversity, and I'm allowing the environment to tell me what to do. The trigger is there, the creative trigger is there. All you got to do is pull it. And what I always do when I'm photographing, I not only photograph in a particular spot, before I break the scene, I press the pause button in my mind and I walk around the subject and I say, well, if I was a second photographer now, where would I shoot from? Where would I go? So I think that's what we do as photographers. We photograph one-dimensionally. We look at a subject, we photograph in one way, and we totally forget to press the pause button. Hey guys, stay where you are and just walk all around. As I walked all around, I thought, that texture's really nice. Hey, wait a second, what excuse now could we have for the couple to be in that shot? Well, what do couples do? They're romantic. Okay, maybe they're about to kiss or kissing. That's perfect because it brings her face upwards. Great, let me change the environment. Bang. Now, so if you were there, I'm sure you think, well, how do I use this? You walk in the streets. I was showing my students how to photograph at night and basically using ambient light, using on-camera flash, off-camera flash, continuous lights and things like that. So as we were walking across the road, I saw the steam coming up. And of course, if you've ever backlit smoke, you know it's the best way to actually show off smoke, or whether it's cigars or whatever it may be. So I have one of my students over here with my SB5000 firing the flash a little bit behind. So what I wanted to do is actually use this flash not only to backlight the smoke, but to actually get a little hint of light on the front of them as well. So then I thought, all right, that was my creative trigger, the actual smoke. Now I need to give them an excuse to be there. And that's my encouragement, guys. If you want something to look glamorous and natural, you want to make something look like it as if it happened on its own, then what you need to do is give them an excuse. For example, if you see a bride and groom, there's beautiful light falling on a nice wall, you stand them there. Some people will just say, well, do what you want and I'll photograph. What I'm saying is give them a starting point. Give them something to do. So what could they be doing there? Maybe the bride's picking up her dress, looking over her shoulder back at her man, and then maybe she's picking up a dress and they're interacting and so on. So she'll pick up a dress, she'll look back at him, he holds a dress, they look at each other. Don't worry about the emotion yet, get my exposure, get my technique right, and then I'll nail the expression. In this case, I thought, cool young couple, mysterious smoke, that gives me the idea for maybe a bit of mystery. So I just get them sort of walking across the street. So at some points the smoke would come out quite big, some a little bit small, something like this. And I'll leave it up to you to work out which one your favorite is. But at one point what I decided to do is actually have her on her own, just jumping. And then we ended up getting this one. I sort of wanted her to almost be surprised as if this is a car headlights hitting her or something like that. Sorry, not hitting her, maybe threatening. And I think this was my favorite in the end because I quite love the very dynamic sort of run and you got that sort of smoke sort of framing her quite beautifully and that worked out really well. It's just fun though, isn't it? Most of us, we don't get playtime on a wedding day or a shoot because we don't give ourselves that time. When was the last time you just went out and photographed for yourself just to play, just to practice your craft? So if you only practice what you do for a living on a paying gig, then how do you expect to be better? All right, let's look at the next environment. What do you think the creative trigger here was? So maybe from our audience, what do you think the creative trigger was? What said to me, oh my God, this would be a great idea right now? If you're walking across the street and then you see the sun hit a building and blinding your face, then what is the light telling us? It's giving us two light sources, right? Because one's from behind, then one's from the front. So I'm saying to you is, whenever you walk along a street and then you get blinded by the reflection of a building or anything, then you know, arguably, you might have the sun hitting the back of you. And of course, the sun's hitting your face, which means, hey, wait a second, hey, couple, bride, stand where I'm standing, turn around. Now I have what appears to be like a two-light setup. So that was the light hitting them was the reflection of the light of the building, and the light behind them was the sun. You put a dark background behind them, then now we've got this beautiful studio setup right there. And to remove distraction, I laid down and shot upwards. And that's how we got that shot. All right, let's keep on playing here. So we're walking the streets again, that same couple with the smoke. And again, what was the creative trigger? You know, anything could be a creative trigger. It can't just hit you in the face. You have to look for them. For me, it's often light, or it's texture, or it's something, as it is with most of us. In this case, there was a beautiful glow of light underneath the actual rail of the stairs, and I'm like, well, obviously no one just happens to sit underneath the light, but it's obviously a stylized, fashionable, editorial kind of image, so I thought, why not? So if you could see me, that I'm right up there shooting down, I expose that beautiful light, and then turn her face, and then we get that shot in that environment. Now, like I said, if I always ended up photographing the predictable shots, then this would be on a street lamp, this would be with maybe some Christmas lights in the background like most of us do, but how much fun would it be to actually do that kind of a shot, then introduce the groom or the partner of the girl, that little hint of the reflection there, and now we have another spread, either in a portrait session album or a wedding album that we wouldn't have had in the first place. Make sense?
That comment that you said where you need to press the pause button and then become your own second photographer. It just means slowing down, which is something we always hear Jerry say, is slowing down. You know, these photos look great that we're looking at. How much post-production was done on them? Are we looking at like really retouched images, or what's going on there?
So some of these images are retouched and some of them are not, but my retouching, or the retouching that we like to do, is actually very simple. I like it invisible, and I guess that's the best compliment that we could have because you didn't even know what we did. The invisible retouching that I call it is basically what we call fashion retouching. Like if I retouch skin, you can see the pores. I don't use any action sets, any keys or any vignettes or anything like that. It's basically skin retouching and color correction, and that's basically it. Also, just for those of you who don't know, we use a company called Lavalu, L-A-V-A-L-U, mylavaloo.com, and they're great for our business. They do all our albums and they're fantastic.
You know, because you're showing these images and you're showing these really great creative crops that you're doing right in camera. Do you visualize the crop that you take before you take the shot, or do you take a few different crops all in the same location and then work out which one you like better at the end?
I love to crop in camera personally. When I look at something, I really say to myself, well, what's the best part about this image? Like I could be posing a full-length image and thinking, you know what, it's not working, but what is really beautiful is right there. So I love dissecting things, I love cropping things, and what I like to do is put two faces together and bodies together like a puzzle. Imagine two pieces of a puzzle putting it together. So the way I teach posing, and I'll do that in upcoming presentations and live broadcasts for JGPT, is I like to understand how two faces can fit in together like a puzzle. If that happens, it's aesthetically pleasing and it works really, really well. So I'm very much an in-camera cropping kind of a guy. I always keep it 2:3. I don't sell anything other than 2:3 ratio to my clients. So for example, back in the old days, it'd be 5:4, 5:7, 8:10, 11:14. What do I sell now? 4:6, 5, 7.5, 8:12, 10:15, and so on and so on and so on. I encourage you to just go for it. As in, don't be too safe. What's the worst that can happen? I mean, you're there to tell a story. So when I crop for so many different reasons. Well, let's keep finding these triggers. Let's see if we can identify them. How many times have you walked past a sign and never thought of it as a light source? I can't tell you how many people will walk past a sign like this, and that is a perfect continuous light softbox, the kind that are illuminating me here right now. So what I do is I bring my subjects really close, and what do? We crop the crap out, and we get these beautiful shots here. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better light source, could you? All we need to do, and for those of you watching at home who are inexperienced, you might say, well, what does good light mean? What does good posing mean? Certainly we'll cover that properly in upcoming episodes of JGPT, but really, most of the time what I do and most people do will turn a face into a light source until the eye that's close to the camera, the complete eye socket gets in light, and we have beautiful catch lights in the eyes. But good lighting, good posing could be defined as flattering and or it helps communicate a message that you are trying to convey to the viewer as the artist. But you can see though that how clean that is, and we cropped it, and how much of a feeling that gives us. Once you start looking at these triggers, you'll see them everywhere, everywhere. So I was walking, I think this is Rodeo Drive at night time, and I saw this sort of translucent glass and a bit of a glow behind it. And I thought, wait a second, if I grab the model really, really close to the actual wall, I'll not only illuminate her, I might get 2 or 3 reflections out of it as well. And that's how we got these shots. It's just fun, man. I mean, it's fun to challenge yourself and to try something a little bit different, something new, rather than always relying on location number 23, pose number 27, you know? Then what I did is I thought, let's not stop there. My encouragement to you watching it at home and you guys in the room is take that first shot, then say to yourself, well, what will go with it in an album? So I want you to start thinking about actually shooting for what you're going to sell. But in this case, she stayed there. We brought her boyfriend in front, illuminated him, and then we had turns of her looking and him being suggested, and then of course, switching that role. Now, wouldn't that make a great spread in a wedding album? That took me 2 shots. I think many of us, what we would have done here, we may have photographed, say, 30 or 40 or 50 to get just 2. I'd rather you slow down and take maybe 5 and you'll sell 2 rather than take 50 and sell 2. You're wasting your time. All right, now what happens if you have no trigger? If there's literally a blank canvas, there's nothing but a concrete wall, and you think, what the hell am I going to do with that? That's just it, guys. Sometimes you just have to create yourself. The trigger has to be, well, if I had a blank canvas and I had some paint, what would I do? In this case, I'm thinking concrete, very sunny. And I'm thinking, all right, well, maybe we can split light the groom or the guy and then maybe use a strong shadow on the concrete and then introduce an element of the background. And then we get this image. Not that it's an incredible image, an award-winning image, but perhaps it's pretty fun for the location that we had to deal with. Then I literally turn around 180 degrees and I see this location. Now, what was the trigger? Well, it's the beautiful texture of the lights and the shade going down. Now, what I want you to do is remember this comment. You want to remove context to improve mystery. Now, what does that mean? Context, we're at a garage. You can see the gap between the pillars. That's the context. I don't want that. If I know where I am, then it's boring. It's just stupid. So I take a few steps to the right and let these overlap each other, crop into it. get my guy right there, because I need now a shot to complement the previous one, don't I? If I want to sell the spread of a wedding album. And I get this. Make sense? If I was loose and wide, I would go to the context that, yes, I might crop it after the fact, but the proofs that go to the client don't look as good as what I was expecting with my vision straight away. Make sense? Speaking of masculine sort of shots and things like that, what was my creative trigger here? It's pretty obvious, but what would you do here? What would some of us do here? We see the sun crop shadows and create beautiful strong lines almost everywhere. Sometimes when you're so absorbed in your camera and the event or you're under pressure, we totally ignore these things. So the trigger was pocket of light, nice shade. That reminds me it's strong, it's harsh, there's a strong line. That reminds me of masculine energy. Let me put the groom there. And that's it. Now you might say, well, Jerry, how do I get him to look at the camera when it's really, really sunny and he's squinting all day long? Well, I might get him to look at a certain spot and he's doing this, and then I just say, all right, okay, so close your eyes. On a count of 3, look at me. 1, 2, 3, click. And he could squint all day long, but I've got that shot that I want and I'm fine. See, guys don't handle the sun nowhere near as good as girls can. Guys are like a bit, they're a bit soft when it comes to those kinds of things. Women tolerate pain a lot more than men. All right, same location, a different couple. How many times, when was the last time you photographed a couple at f/22? Most of us don't do that, do we? We shoot at shallow depth of field, 2.8, 1.4, f2, f4, and so on and so on and so on. But most of us don't think about actually increasing that aperture to create an unusual effect. So the trigger again was there. I thought, wouldn't it be cool to put the groom with a shadow behind him and the girl with a light, so dark and light, and like think of all those metaphors. So I did this shot. Now you would swear that was a composite or a composite, as the Americans would say. I'm American now, so as we say. So this shot, they were standing about 3-4 feet away from each other, but I shot at f/22. Now I know it seems obvious, but when was the last time you did that? Probably never. So most people would shoot 2 exposures for this, or HDR or something like that, but I think it's fun to just try some different things.
Earlier you talked about slowing down and how that's such a key, because in being able to see things, actually being able to look at everything in your environment, the more that you shoot, the longer that you've been a photographer, the easier it gets. So don't get discouraged if you still freak out when you go to a shoot and you're at a wedding and you just don't see everything until after the fact. It's okay. Just keep that in your mentality, keep that in your mind as you're out shooting, and it will come. The more you keep trying to practice it, the more it will happen. How high are you happy to go with your ISO in those night shots that we were showing earlier? I mean, it was really dark. Some of them were at midnight and stuff. So how high are you happy to go with your camera?
Well, I mean, obviously with the latest cameras, they're incredible. I mean, you can crank them up ridiculously. Being a Nikon ambassador, I'm very proud to be a Nikon ambassador. I have all the latest, greatest cameras. The D850 is incredible, the D5, but I mean, we're talking 12,800 easily. You know what I mean? I think many of us freak out. What? 10,000 ISO, or what's a couple going to say? I think we as photographers overthink the quality of a high ISO image way more than couples do. Has a bride ever said to you, you know what, I know you're not shooting with a D5 because I can see people fringing in the shadow areas and really the noise levels are terrible? I mean, no bride's going to say that. Now, yes, we don't want to provide crap to our clients, but think about it. If you're shooting at night, it's probably at a reception, maybe in a church. You're probably not going to enlarge those much anyway. So just don't overthink it. Crank the ISO up, find your threshold, and stick with it, but push it a bit further than you think. So for me, easily 12,800 and beyond.
Do you scout out the areas for these triggers, like to find the best areas that will provide you with these triggers before you bring a client out for a shoot? Because I don't know that too many people will plan their wedding portraits to happen under a bridge or in a garage. So do you pre-scout any of that stuff?
Well, let's talk about just normal locations for a moment. So I don't want to go extreme. So for example, let me re-ask the question for you perhaps and give you a more broader answer that might be more appealing to the broader audience. Do I scout locations, period? So if I'm photographing a wedding at this place or whatever, do I go there beforehand to look at it? Well, here's the thing. Unless I'm photographing the wedding or the portrait session at the exact same time that I'm scouting it, there's really no point. Now, yes, I could create the good light or find the good light and just make it work, no problem, but I usually like to use the light that's there. If I need to add light with a speed light, a continuous light, a strobe, then of course I'll do it. So very rarely will I go to a location and look around and see what I'm going to do. That being said, if you shoot a wedding that you've never been to before, like a location, and it's a big hotel or it's a big mansion, then walk around, at least know the possibilities and know the priorities. And at least in your mind, you'll say, all right, okay, if all weather's good and lighting is good, I will go to here, 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 and here, and here is a bonus. But I'm telling you now, I don't know if many of you at home or you in the room, guys, that you remember this photograph that I've taken of that gold staircase. Sort of one of my legacy shots, you'd call them. It's a bride lying down with a beautiful gold staircase. I went to a house overlooking the Harbour Bridge in Sydney. And I get there, the house was a beautiful house, but it was dark. There was nowhere inside the house that actually looked good, that made the bride shine bright. And guess where I photographed? In the front study, where they put all of their crap from the other rooms to make all the other rooms look beautiful, but they put it all in the front room. So I went in the front room and stacked all the crap out and simply drew the warm translucent blind, and it gave me this perfect warm softbox. And they trusted me, and I ended up doing 90% of my coverage right there. Look, don't be a hero and never scout anything. Know where you're shooting, go for it, but unless you're shooting at the exact same time, it will all change on the day of the shoot. All right, let's keep on going, shall we? What was the trigger here? What do you think the trigger was here? Well, we've got a beautiful textured wall, but whereabouts on the textured wall would be fun to shoot? What's begging to be done? What do you think? You see that beautiful little arch of that shadow? Maybe we can have some negative space. Now the sun's coming up really, really high down low, so we need an excuse to bring their face upwards. Now remember this, one strong direction of light, two people interacting, one person suffers. That's just a fact. You will never get perfect lighting on two people with one direction of light when they're interacting. The only way you would do it is with a reflector, but then that's almost two directions of light. In this case, then she gets the good light, the negative space is there, and that's basically it. Now again, this is not going to win any awards, but I'm trying to show you these triggers that help and make you understand perhaps all the things you've been missing off all the years. Now, how many times have you actually walked into a bedroom and you've seen blinds being pulled down because it's actually very, very hot, and you see a little glow of light reflecting off the wall? Did you think that you could easily just walk up, pull that up, and now all of a sudden we have this beautiful reflector? And now we get this shot. And you would swear that was probably done in a studio or with a nice light or something. So remember, every time you see a blind like that, bring them back. This was at a workshop in Turkey. So you might think, do I have like 300 assistants on a wedding day? And that's how this was taken. Now, so many people ask me about the following shot, so I will be showing one older one that you may have seen before, but for those of you at home who haven't seen this, for those of you in the room that haven't seen this, everyone asked me about it, so I thought I'd actually show you. And it's also a great lesson on finding and learning from those creative triggers. So what was my creative trigger here? Well, the bride was inside the house. I was with the groom. We were walking outside. So if you can imagine, this TV represents the window of the house. So I'm basically walking, the groom is between me and the house, and as I was walking, of course you walk like this, as I was walking, I saw the reflection of his silhouette against the overcast sky. But then as he crossed the bride, I saw her vividly through that reflection. I thought, wait a second here, without being all romantic and lovey-dovey about it all, but maybe we can actually produce an image as a metaphor of two becoming one, of a bride and groom becoming one. So what I did was, I asked if they had a ladder, small little one. They did. He stood on the ladder, so I can get him perfectly in that overcast sky. So if you can imagine, now I'm seeing a reflection of his silhouette in the glass. Then, if she comes now through that actual silhouette, now I will see her face merged into his silhouette, and we actually get this image. It's actually quite surreal. The more you look at it, the more you see. Like the fact that his shoulder looks like her shoulder. Almost his hair looks like her hair, like almost like a modern haircut of a, almost like your haircut, baby girl. But that's what I'm trying to say, is that how cool would it be to recognize those things, but they're not just going to hit you in the face. You have to look for them. Hopefully after today's presentation, we've not only given you very tangible ideas that if you see a blind, you'll do it. If you see a fluorescent light in the garage, you'll do it. But that'll give you an idea of how to use the environment other ways, for examples that you haven't seen. Now, what do we see here? Now, this is Bryant Park Library. Is that what it is, baby?
Bryant Park, no, that's the New York City Library. But it's just next door to Bryant Park.
Okay, all right, wonderful. So we're at this location in New York, and I'm sure many of us would use it as a background. Maybe get them on the steps, maybe use this, the wall, maybe get the couple away from the background, things like that. And the more I looked at it, I thought, I saw this particular sort of rail there, and I'm looking at these things. I'm like, wait a second, if I was to walk all around there and shoot back that way, I might get a really, really cool view. Now, nothing groundbreaking or anything like that, but I think many of us, we tend to see what's obvious first. There's no creative trigger. It had to hit us in the face. Great location, let me just shoot there, whatever. And then I go down that rail and shoot up. I think it was basically like a wheelchair access to get to the library. And there was too many people going in and out as I was photographing, and there was too much distraction. So I just got rid of the distraction. I just posed my group there and got rid of them totally. Now, we got great reactions and things like that. All is good. But then I wanted to photograph with my beautiful, juicy 105mm 1.4 lens that makes everything look incredible in the background. Because you can imagine the trees in the background and the lamp in the background and everything would look incredible. The problem is too many people walking in and out. Now, I'm not going to sit there and photograph and just ask my retoucher, can you get rid of those people? I'm a purist at heart. Certainly I do what I do afterwards in post-production, but if I can do it in camera, I will. Sure enough, we took about 20 shots. I had a leg in there, I had a head in there, and we finally got the shot that we were looking for in the beginning. Now, that beautiful light, we had the sunlight reflecting off the opposing building coming in this way. I wanted a quiet moment between the couple. Do you notice something here? The hands are exposing the thinnest part of her waist. I think many of us, when we pose a guy or hugging a girl, it's always actually covering up the thinnest part of her waist. What a waste of a waist, okay? So bring those back. We actually bend that knee in a little bit to create a little bit of separation, and the leg, beautiful. You see how the faces fit like a puzzle, as we were discussing? And then those hands are saying something. Remember what we said? Good lighting, good posing is either flattering and or it helps communicate the message that we're trying to convey to the viewer. Make sense? So we got that from that. Kept on walking the streets. What else do we see here? Well, what was the trigger? Well, the Chrysler Building, probably my favorite building in New York City. Beautiful building, but then I've got deep shadow, I've got strong highlight. Well, what the hell do? I think most of us would probably have come to the conclusion that we'll get some maybe off-camera flash, we'll expose to the background, get some off-camera flash, and that's exactly what I did. Now this time though, what I did was I actually flicked my white balance to shade that actually makes the flash look like a video light. Because I didn't really have a diffuser, I didn't really have anything with me other than a bare bulb flash. And then we ended up getting this shot. What you probably don't know, for me to get this perspective, get the hints of the Chrysler Building there and crop the crap out as we discussed, I had to lie on the ground and shoot upwards. Now here's a very important tip. Whenever you're lying down on the ground or squatting down and shooting upwards with a wide angle lens, if your couples stay straight like this, then it's going to look like they're doing that. They're going to look really terrible. What you don't know in this, in fact, he's leaning forward literally about this much. And I've cropped the awkwardness out so you don't see it, but you would swear he was standing normally. I have a gap between his arms that also provide a silhouette for him, because most of us think of the silhouette for the girl to get her shape, but you don't want to make him look wide either. We turn his face into the light source. Another little tip is this. Have you ever actually had an off-camera flash with one of your assistants illuminating somebody, and then they have to you have to fire the shot like 3-4 times to get the flash in the right spot? Here's a tip. So let's say Justin, of course. Justin, so if you're there, Justin, and I want to illuminate you, And I just say to my assistant, well, stand 45 degrees and just point it towards Justin. Well, it's a hit and miss. What I want to do is I want to create a shadow on the side of the face as close to the camera, therefore creating the short side, the narrow side, the sexy side, make it look slimmer and sharper. So what I do is I tell my assistant, when you're holding the flash, I want you to draw an imaginary line from your eyes, your face, to the flash, and keep on going until you can just see the other eye socket. Does that make sense? So if you were photographing me and this was the flash, right, you might say to the assistant, just photograph this way. But draw an imaginary line between the eyes of the assistant, the flash, point it towards me, and keep on going where you just see this eye socket. Why do I say eye socket? Because you could have half the eye look a bit creepy. Keep on going, fire the flash once, and guess what? Perfect shadow, both eyes perfectly lit, and we get it every single time. All right, it was muggy as hell. Oh my God, have you ever shot in Florida? In Miami and all that kind of thing. It's crazy. Well, actually, was this Miami? Where was this, baby girl?
I'm trying to see.
This was at a workshop.
Yes.
Where did we photograph this one again? It was all muggy and misty and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, it was one of those places that was really muggy. So we're walking past this restaurant and it was all foggy. It reminded me of the Titanic scene, you know, when they were doing it in the thing and like. Was it Chicago? Oh, it was all misty.
It was rainy, and so it got really muggy.
There we go. So I thought, all right, how about we expose to that background? So basically the mist, the fog, the lights in the background was my trigger. Then I thought, we'll get them in the way, and no matter where I put them, there were spotlights giving me some really ugly light falling on their faces. Now, for me to underexpose the background, there was still that light in their faces. So I placed my reflector on top of them to get a clear path. Then I underexpose the background, and we get something like this. And then, why wouldn't we, in this kind of a situation, crop a bit closer? How cool is it that we can actually get a shot like this that actually gets their profile perfectly sharp, and then that little eyelash on the other side, some may consider it distracting. I think it looks really, really cool. It's also out of focus, but this beautiful little profile between them that form a little puzzle. Can you imagine that at the end of an album and then blending this into black and a big panorama like this? How cool would that be? But something so simple, we have to look at that environment and recognize those triggers, but also look for them. That's the whole idea. Now, we're walking past this location, and as you know, I'm a big fan of any light source. If it illuminates, I'll use it. So I'm walking down the stairs, and then I shoot from above and I shoot down, and I take this shot. And I've got to say, it's a boring shot. It's a well-lit, boring photograph. So I thought, all right, well, wait a second. Let's explore this location a little bit more. So then I thought, wait a second. That light source, if I squat down the stairs and shoot this way, then I'm actually going to get the light falling on the couple and quite a beautiful abstract reflection. So I get this image. So there was someone on the other side illuminating her with an ice light, and then I look at that reflection. I'm like, that's worth a shot on its own. But how cool would that be on a canvas print as a talking piece on the wall in your lounge room, for example? And that's a whole other seminar, guys, but I sincerely and strongly believe in the power of print. All right, guys. Now, what's my trigger here? This is a pretty boring shot, but what's my trigger? The trigger is that beautiful little silhouette of the foliage with that beautiful glow from behind. But I need to isolate that to get that romance. So what did I do? I brought out the ice light, I illuminated her, and I wanted a quiet little, what I call a moment between a moment. Not so obvious. So I get her in light, a little semi-silhouette of him, and that beautiful glow behind that gives us a beautiful sort of feeling, you know? Let's keep on going. Let's just build our creative muscle now about how to actually really start to see the world a little bit differently. Now, many of us probably have seen and photographed with Christmas lights. Like at night time, you see Christmas lights, and we always think of that bokeh effect. We get someone in the foreground and so on. Well, you might only see a few of them in a tree during the day. But if you get a couple way, way, way in the foreground, expose for them and have that sort of out of focus, it can add a beautiful little element to a shot. Of course, the brightest part of the image is still this, but that just makes it interesting to look at. Does that make sense? Fun, fun, fun. All right. I told you earlier in the presentation that I'm a very proud of Nikon ambassador, and probably one of my proudest moments of my career is last year I was chosen to do the campaign for the Nikon D850. And not only did we represent the wedding genre, but also the fashion genre as well, which I was really, really excited about. And this was shot in actually Las Vegas. I don't know if you guys have been there before. This is called the Parisian Palace in Las Vegas. An incredible ornate location. Imagine like Gianni Versace and Roberto Cavalli had a love child and built a house. That's what this particular house looks like. It's incredible. So anyway, I thought I can photograph the reflection. It sort of seemed obvious that if we were in this location that we would photograph the reflection. But then I'm like, well, that's obvious. I may have done that, but the frame actually was incredible. So let me just photograph her there. Now you can see that she's standing next to a window. So there's a window next to her on the left-hand side of her, and there's a little window behind the mirror. So I thought, this is perfect. This is just a studio setup. I can include the gold frame in the actual shot, illuminate her from the front with a little tickle of light in her face, and have a little accent light on her jaw in the back of her. The problem was the sun was coming strongly and vividly on her shoulder, and I just couldn't get rid of it. Now, you've got exposing for that kind of light and the sunlight hitting the shoulder, you're not going to resurrect that in Photoshop. It's going to be almost impossible to do it well. So Melissa was wearing socks, got her to take off her socks, rolled them up, and I wedged it between the mirror and the actual wall that blocked off that spotlight. After this shot was taken, I got the guy involved and we ended up doing this image. So this was photographed at 1.4. I love that plane of focus. You've got her eyelid there and her lips, beautifully, perfectly in focus. And then how important is that little gap between the nose and the forehead? If it was joint, it'd be okay. I'd prefer it overlap properly, because if that was touching it just like that, it actually makes his nose look pronounced. Hashtag bigger, which we don't want. And then how important is that I have that little gap above his ear, and how important is that I have a little bit of separation beyond that corner, and then we have all those beautiful tones mixing and harmonizing together for a beautiful effect. Cool, cool? I talked about Christmas lights, and I'm sure some of us have done this in the past. This is the classic shot that most people would have done if you photograph weddings or couples. So I saw these Christmas lights in my environment. I grabbed the couple. It actually looks like Melissa a little bit, don't you think? Quite crazy. So we had the couple looking at each other. My recommendation is this. So if a couple are facing each other, have your assistant, whoever's holding the flash or whether it's on a stand, about 6 feet away from them. Never have the flash too low. If the flash is too low, it'll hit light up here and it'll dwindle off and you won't get that beautiful light around their profile. So my advice to you is, if you've got a bride here and a groom here, then the light should be 6 feet behind and as high up as possible on the same level. And I usually use the groom to hide the flash. So what my recommendation is, get yourself a little monopod, put your flash on it, put it up, and then that monopod and that flash is hidden behind the groom. Turn the flash so it bounces perfectly in the middle of the couple, bouncing between, getting that beautiful glow. In this case, this next shot for the campaign, I wanted to actually test the high ISO capability of the D850, hence sort of emulating a shot that I've popularized over the years. But what I did though, I brought the groom a little bit closer to me, so the flash hits his face and she gets a bit more prettier light. Does that make any sense? Now then, it's funny, I sort of made them laugh, and at one particular point I got that, you know, that smoke in a can type thing? So we got the smoke in a can that emulates sort of dust and environment and all that kind of stuff. So we had this sort of remnants of this smoke sort of filtering across. I made them laugh. She moved forward. The cool thing was the flash hit his face perfectly now as a perfect reflector back on her, and we get this shot. So I love the fact that he's almost in silhouette, and it almost looks out of focus. If you, trust me, if you go close to it, you'll see her eye perfectly sharp there. So it was a bit of luck that grabbed the focus there when I was photographing it as they moved when I made them laugh out of that shot. All right, let's move on. This is a really cool location in Melbourne. I was doing this portrait and I was shooting at a very shallow depth of field. I think it was 1.4, I think with the 85 at this point. And then I thought to myself, all right, this is great. Everything's out of focus, beautiful bokeh effect, looks all cool. But how cool would it be to actually maybe bump up the light on her face, narrow the light down. So I use the ice light with barn doors, or barn doors, as you would say, and narrow it down and underexpose the background. So I'm using the ice light with the barn doors, and then we end up getting a shot like this. So beautiful quality of light, very, very soft. You sort of see as well how we've got the lips parted as well. If you ever want to make lips that are small or bigger actually look even softer and bigger again, is I always ask my models, my subjects, to just breathe through your mouth. But not like, that's silly, right? Like just part the lips enough to breathe through the mouth. That reminds the model to relax the lips and without pouting. Because some people have seen America's Next Top Model and then they all start pouting and then everyone pouts and it just looks ridiculous. So little things like that can really, really help you. All right, so here I was in where was this? This was in Melbourne. This was at a business centre in a hotel, okay? So what was the trigger? What am I looking for here? What was the creative trigger that made me shoot here? Well, as I walked into that particular little alcove there, I saw a translucent sort of film or sticker, whatever you want to call it, on that piece of glass. Straight away I said to myself, silhouette, because I could place someone in the path, have a nondescript background, and then all of a sudden get this perfect little profile. It didn't stop there. So I set them up, I exposed for the background, which can make the couple go dark with less detail. But then, in a business center, you normally see computers. I saw an iMac, so I positioned my camera, my lens, close to the reflective surface, and then I ended up doing this shot. But how cool would that be in the spread of a wedding album? Now, you have to build enough trust, of course, to shoot this kind of thing with a couple, because they want to photograph next to that fountain, and here you are in a business center photographing next to a translucent piece of glass and the reflection of an iMac, which is quite ridiculous. But if you build enough trust and you take a shot and you show them, then they'll do anything for you for the rest of the time, don't you think? Cool, cool? What's the trigger here? What do you think I did here? I'm sort of pretty much telling you by showing you the behind the scenes photograph, but what was the trigger and how would I use it? The answer is not difficult, it's just, that's this thing. We tend to overcomplicate an environment where we don't look at it for what it is. What is that? What is that we all have in the back of our car, in the trunk of our car? What is exactly what you're seeing here? What is this? And what kind of reflector is it? It's a silver one, right? If it's a silver reflector, does that make it softer or a bit more contrasty and sharper? It's a specular, it's more contrasty, it's sharper, it's going to be punchier. So all I do is I crop the crap out and I get that beautiful little highlight in the behind her head, and then we ended up photographing this, and you would swear that was done in the studio. Well, really, I made the studio was already there, I just had to find it. And that's what I'm getting at, is that many of us don't look at the environment either like a studio, or we don't recognize or look for those creative triggers. And sometimes it can be so obvious, but sometimes it's the most obvious things you don't even see, because they're so obvious, it's just there, you take it for granted. Make sense? But pretty cool to be able to get that shot from that environment. And I could show you the original image, and it wasn't too different than what I've done with it post-production. All right. Okay. What do you see here? What was my creative trigger? What obviously would I want to get in this shot? The skyline. Okay, so it's pretty obvious. We want to get the skyline. So generally speaking, if you know me or you've been taught by me, you know that I'll always choose light above location. But if I find a great location with not so great light, I will create the good light or find the good light. So what's the problem here? If I expose for that, what's going to happen in the foreground? It's going to be dark. So what do I have to do? Fill light, so maybe an off-camera flash. So the environment told me that. Basically said, Jerry, if you want that city and you shooting up above here, there's a little balcony, then obviously get the couple over here and shoot down and have the water envelop their faces and frame their faces. That's basically it. So then what did I do? I grabbed my off-camera flash. What did I do? I draw an imaginary line with my assistant's eye to the flash, to the person's eye, moved it to a point where we can just see what's going on. It illuminates the eye socket closest to the camera. I changed my white balance to cloudy to add a little bit of warmth to make the flash almost look like video light, a tungsten video light to a certain extent, and then we get this shot. What else is this environment telling us? I want you to look at the environment. We've taken the obvious shot. What else is the environment telling us? What else is the creative trigger? Literally screaming and saying, shoot me here. Let me cut to the chase here. So this is a bar table, right? What do you do at a bar table? What would a couple be doing? They're leaning on it. So what I'm getting at is the environment, the light, the location, the hair, the dress will tell you what to do. That's the creative trigger. And again, it's nothing awe-inspiringly different, but I guarantee you've walked past these triggers and totally ignored them. So what did I do? Well, we brought them in the way, tilt the face, chin up a little bit, even though the better quality of light was coming through here, but it was dappled, so I turned the other way, didn't look good. So I backlit them, and this was fun. Then, I'm not a big fan of flare, but I thought it'd be fun to actually create a different sequence of shots with a bit of flare coming in my lens, and crop a little bit closer, and then we got that. So the cool thing was that I ended up doing 2 series of shots, one that was perfectly saturated, like this, just strong saturation, and then with that bit of flare coming through and all that kind of stuff. Cool, cool? All right, what would most of us do in this situation? Think about it. It's pretty obvious, but I wanted to spell it out. How many people do you know and that you've met, and photographers that you've met, and you may be even one of them, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but you almost shoot with flash all the time? I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying that if you use fill flash or use a big strobe on every single image, guess what? Your work all looks the same. It looks good, but it looks predictably good. There's no heartbeat. You know how some people will nominate themselves, I'm a natural light shooter, I'm a flash shooter. I'm just a photographer. I don't care what it is. If it illuminates, I'll use it. So my encouragement to you guys in the room, for those of you at home, if you're inexperienced, and it's an easy approach to say, I'm a natural light shooter, I can crank the ISO up, I don't need speed lights, I don't need anything, I'll just shoot what's there. That's totally fine, but what happens if you go to a church that's too dark? What happens if you go to a church when the priest says no flash? What happens if something happens to one of your units? What happens if you can't take your strobe on that mountain or whatever it may be? You need to learn to use everything. Really, you need to be an expert at what you do so that anything gets thrown in front of you, you can actually do. So my suggestion is that yes, you can use flash, and I think many of us, half of us would have done this kind of a shot. We backlight everything, we crop the crap out, we crop the trees above them, isolate the shadow, get them walking, having some fun, and so on and so forth. But let's look back at that location again. Do you see how there's a hill going up, and then I'm going up again? And now that's making me thinking of a couple of shots. The triggers were my perspective. I just said, guys, I want you to go down there and I want to have a look at the quality of light. I saw their long shadows. That looked good. Then the next trigger was, let me isolate the actual shot. And the next trigger was, when the sun's going down, I'm going to get them on that hill and I'm going to stand where they are and shoot upwards. So I'm in this situation right now. And then I need a silhouette. Now, most of us who do a silhouette will get the couple looking at each other, like I've showed you a couple times today. Looking at each other, foreheads touching, all that kind of thing. Don't get your couple to kiss when it's a silhouette. That's my recommendation. If you get a couple looking at each other, kissing, their shadows bleed into each other, there's no luxury. The luxury of a forehead, a nose, lips and jaw is very beautiful, very sexy, very sensual, let alone 2 people about to kiss or something like that. What I'm getting at is a silhouette. What does that mean? Shape. I'm showing a shape. Show shape. Give them something to do. In this case, I just got them walking. So I took this shot first. This might be a nice panorama, might be great for the wall, something like that. But don't you think this has a lot more soul? How important is it that I got him to cross his legs over, which gives him shape? See, most of us, we can point the toe of the bride, bend the knee, shift the weight back, arch the back. We get this beautiful shape of a bust, waist, hips, sexy, beautiful. Make sense? And now, with him, we often see the S-curve in the bride. With the groom, I often refer to it as the V or the C. A V is broad shoulders, and if I bring my legs, so in other words, if I stand like this, hang the body down and then move the body like this, my shoulders are broader towards the camera. I put one leg and I just bend that knee. I don't do it in a feminine way, I just bend that knee. that's creating more of a V shape. And then how important is that little sliver of light between his arm and his body? Because after all, don't we want to know where our body stops and starts rather than looking that wide? Can you imagine looking that wide? Make sense?
It's just really awesome to hear you talk about the progression from beginning to end in these shots, especially in that last series that you took, because I think a lot of us, I know I would have probably stopped after that first one with the shadow in the foreground. As a matter of fact, I was shooting with you at that wedding, and I took a shot like that, and I'm like, and I'm done. I was very happy with my shot. But it's really helpful to hear you talk about your thought process as you took that shot and then progressed to get better and better and better and end up with that last one with that silhouette that was mind-boggling. So that is, it's really helpful, and a lot of people have mentioned it as well, really helpful to hear your thought process, not just what you do, this is what you do in this situation, in this pose and that kind of thing, but to hear why you're doing that and how you're thinking that so that we can think for that on our own too, which is really helpful. If you ever get, or if we ever get feedback from our clients that you're not really shooting enough of the ambience or the environment that you're in, I know in this situation it's a little bit different, but when you're doing those really close crops or you're trying to crop out the environment because you're not in a really nice situation, do you ever get clients that will say, well, you didn't really show where my wedding took place or where we did our portrait session? And that really comes down to making sure that you work for your client and then also work for yourself. So you get the images that your clients need. You get those full-length portraits where you're showing off the historical nature of what you're photographing. Get those first. You're working for your clients. But then after you get your bread and butter, then you can have your dessert and you can play around and get some of these more creative crops and have a little bit more fun with the images. So that's a really cool idea too.
Awesome, absolutely. Guys, we are not parents, but we are a proud uncle and auntie to many people in the industry. But from a blood perspective, I have 2 nephews and a niece, and my younger nephew and niece, I always tell them, do what you have to do what you want to do. Basically, do your homework, pass, then you can party all you want. So sometimes you don't want to hear from your parents. You need an uncle to come and say to you, do what you have to do what you want to do. In other words, like Melissa said, get the shots that will make them happy, that are predictable. Then now you can play all you want. And trust me, you can be as creative as all you want, but if you don't get those bread and butter shots, then that's going to be a huge problem. All right, guys, and I can't tell you enough and reiterate enough about how important it is to slow down. Slowing down, I know that's probably the easiest 2 words you can put together. I'm saying to you though that as far as the advice that I have after teaching now for 18 years and shooting professionally for 25 years, the biggest problem that I see with most photographers, who I know can get better almost overnight, is to take less shots, slow down, and do them better. And I'm telling you, that'll be if you have to, print out a label, a sticker, put the word slow down, stick it on the back of your camera. So when you put your camera to your eye, it reminds you to slow down. Trust me, it's the best advice I can give you. All right, let's move on. So this is a recent wedding in Melbourne that we did. So what was the trigger here? Here I am doing my test shot to basically photograph the bridal party walking in. But I saw this location, I thought, wait a second, there's a creative trigger. What am I going to do now? What do you think I did with this location when I had 5 minutes and I took the couple out of the actual room and said, hey guys, I've got a great idea, I want to do this. What do you think I saw here that was the trigger? What I'm thinking is we get a couple of champagne glasses, and what I love about this is that the actual diffuser, let's call it a diffuser, actually mutes all the colors, but the only color that I'll see is the one that's closest enough to the actual material, so I get this one. That ended up being the title page of their wedding album. Make sense? Most of us, I guarantee, would be sitting there freaking out, waiting to get the right exposure for the couple to walk in the reception venue, but you have to be on the prowl. You have to look, you have to search, you have to recognize those creative triggers.
I actually have a question that I'd like to ask that no one knows to ask, because I was photographing this wedding with you, and what I learned when you took this image is actually, I saw that you were going to take a silhouette, and I just thought to put them behind there, but can you talk about where you position them to get that that great of a reflection? If you know where I'm going with this?
Silhouette, yeah. I mean, they were exceptionally close to the glass because they will, if you went an inch further away, it would just blend in and bleed out into nothing. So it's literally go as close as you can to the glass without touching it. And that's what I recommend, because sometimes you might get an abstract face, like going really close and then adding contrast to it. But the minute you do this on a piece of glass, it looks really weird. So it's a tough thing. All right, what about this? I walk in this bedroom, there's a lot of mess, a lot of fuss, but there's a beautiful reflection in the mirror. So what do? I position myself right on the edge, I turn her around, and this is a pretty obvious trigger. The reflection is pretty obvious. But what was not so obvious is this. I thought, okay, I've got so much crap all around, I want to open up that door and go nice and tight and get that beautiful light, that sliver of light tickling her back there, and then we get this shot. So sometimes, like I said, it could be an obvious location that we've used and we've shot before, but maybe we haven't gone to that extent. So let me show you a handful of spreads of the wedding album that the couple actually purchased. So this dapple beautiful sunlight coming through, and we got this, that beautiful tickle of light. I love that little dapple light on her face. Then, so that was the first spread of her coverage. Then that was the second spread. You love it how it sort of just goes up. Then it sort of leads your eye in, and then that was a detail spread. All just using that beautiful sunlight coming through. I think many of us would not use direct sunlight coming through a window for a bride's coverage of a bride wearing a white dress. Then I'm shooting it very shallow depth of field here as well, and then that's her adjusting her veil, and that's that as well. Pretty cool? All right, let's keep on looking at these creative triggers. Where would you shoot here? What's the creative trigger? Where would I play here? I mean, obviously it's just a beautiful place. What I'm seeing, I'm a texture guy, by the way, guys. I love touching, I love putting my hand in lentil. John and Delisa Cooper, who are our neighbours, they wash their dishes with a rubber sponge, and it has these little nipples on it. I don't know what you call it. I'm sorry for want of a better word. But the sponge had so much texture on it, and I said, I would be very happy if you bought me one as a present. Sure enough, the time that I saw them the next time, and now, as I'm looking at my computer, I'm just touching this sponge. But anyway, what has that got to do with this photograph? I love crunching leaves. If it's a hot day and the leaves are all crunchy, I'll step on them, but that's my trigger, right? So what I did was, this was a bit too harsh for the kind of soft photograph that I wanted to produce. So I grabbed more leaves, put them all here, stood up on this particular spot and shot down, and I ended up getting this shot. Arms off the body, turn the face, beautiful soft light, beautiful shaped legs, and that was it. This is a wedding I shot in Greece last year on one of my best friends growing up, and I said, screw it, I'm just going to climb up on the church, because the church was really short, and I wanted the view. Can you imagine? These guys are literally about 3-4 feet away. Where am I going to stand? Where am I going to sit to take the photographs of the ceremony? And you might think, Jerry, do you wear shorts at a wedding? I'm like, if I'm ever going to wear shorts at a wedding, it's going to be a 100-degree wedding in Greece where your best friend's getting married, and it's okay that you wear shorts because some of the guests are wearing shorts as well. So there it is. Took this picture. The sun's going down. They're getting married just before sunset. So I only had literally maybe 15 minutes of sunlight. But I knew when I was up in that church, I thought to myself, the sun's going down. Straight after the ceremony, I'm going to take some shots with the rocks that I could see clearly over there. And then I thought, behind the church was a field. I'm going to wait for the sun to completely set and get a silhouette of the church. So let me show the environment. So can you imagine this next shot? I stood about there, shot back this way, and I ended up getting this shot. And again, I need a silhouette. I need something that separates their body parts and so on, so I can basically see between them. All right, let's have a look at this next shot. Now, I see a pocket of light. It's very strong, it's very harsh, it's very masculine. So I'm like, great, dude, stand there in that pocket of light. But I don't know about you, but it looks awkward. The gap between his legs, just doesn't feel right to me. Then I thought to myself, you know what, I'm not really digging him in that shot yet. But let me just cross his legs a little bit, but let's get the bride in the foreground to make it look a lot more interesting. So tilt the face, chin up, beautiful shadows on the cheekbones, life is good. And then I thought to myself, wouldn't it be cool to shoot at f/22 like I did that previous time? And you see how much difference that makes. That's just too abstract. He looks a little bit weird there, completely out of focus. This one is a lot more interesting. Let's not waste it. You know what? There was that beautiful pocket of light there. She looks amazing there. Let me pretend to be a second photographer, press the pause button, take a few steps and walk around and then see something different. So that pocket of light led me there, but as I diagnosed the scene, there were other creative triggers that I responded to in a better way. This actually was also in Greece, this wedding. This was not last year, 2 years ago. So they were walking, we had some fun, and what do you think is, well, it's a personal opinion, but what do you like the most about, say, this shot, or them, or what they're wearing, or things like that? What's beautiful to look at right now? For me, it was her back, that beautiful, the small of her back, the beautiful texture, that beautiful little shadow on the back of her dress, on her body, I thought was beautiful. So I thought to myself, I want to photograph her, an excuse to photograph her from behind. What could she be doing? Maybe she's adjusting her hair. That gave me an excuse to do something. I thought, wait a second, all right, I want to introduce the groom now. Before I stop and I recreate that pose for any unknown reason, let me do something. So I thought to myself, how do I connect them and build them like a puzzle? So can you imagine? I'm photographing her from behind, she's adjusting her hair, I want to put him into the shot, make it look like a contemporary sort of editorial kind of picture. So I thought, great, let me put his hands in his pockets, he's looking away, and we get this image. Do you notice how I position him? This gap and this gap are exactly the same. Then I have this beautiful gap mirroring what he's doing. This is center composition, which we would say is pretty boring, but then when you off-center it, it breaks the monotony and the predictability of a center composition, and that's basically it. Make sense? All right. All right, let's move on. I was doing a boudoir shoot of this girl, and this was quite soft and very playful. I thought it'd be nice to open up the doors, allow the light to flood through, you get a beautiful shot, no problem. Again, now what was the creative trigger? What is, obviously she's a gorgeous girl, but what do you think would be good to feature in this shot? I'm loving that beautiful headpiece. I'm thinking, how cool is that? So what I do, obviously I want to be discreet, so sometimes when I'm more risque, I still cover up the naughty bits, especially for weddings and things like that. Sometimes, you know, some brides or boudoir sessions, they want to be a little bit more risque, no problem. In this case, I had the idea of actually placing that beautiful headpiece over one of her eyes and get that beautiful little peer upwards. And then we just changed our angle and we got a completely different shot. Make sense? Now, we're in Budapest and we're there with Melissa and she wore this beautiful dress. So I'm like, you know what, baby, I'm going to photograph you now. And what is the trigger here? Obviously, it's a great location, no doubt. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that this will be a great place to photograph. But what was the trigger and what made me shoot where and why? The window. Okay, let's diagnose it. So it's the window. Now, would she be standing on the stairwell? What would she be doing? Where would it be good to put her face? So the trigger is, do you see these pieces? The ivy is growing in a way where it's framing the person. So I'm thinking, I'm going to put her head and shoulders somewhere here. If I expose for her perfectly, everything will blow out and look ridiculous. So really it's a silhouette now. Because if I darken this exposure, I'll get the detail that I want, but get this beautiful foliage. So I thought to myself, let's get her standing on this area and do a very dramatic classic pose, reminiscent from the old Hollywood days. And we ended up getting this image. Retain the detail. We got a little of a, it's a silhouette per se, but she turned her face to the light, so we get a beautiful detail on her dress. And quite beautifully is that she had this beautiful sort of almost like ivy style pattern in her dress that actually looked incredible, and we used that. This is also in Budapest, beautiful statues. The sun's from behind. Well, what the hell do I do? Well, I'm sure most of us would have thought to do something like this. Off-camera flash, I lower my camera angle, shoot upwards, and get that beautiful drama there as well. This was in a beautiful concert hall, isn't it right? Yes. Something like that? Yeah, an opera house in Budapest. So as we're walking in, we've got this beautiful shaft of light. Now, shaft of light, opera house, what do you think of? What's the creative trigger now? What do you think of? If I say the words opera house, opera, Broadway, what's one of the most famous shows in the history of mankind? Opera. What does that word trigger you? So you look at this and you think, Phantom of the Opera. That's what I thought. So I thought, if you've watched it, you'll see these dramatic pictures of the girls sort of running away and this beautiful glowing, and that gave me that idea. I'm not saying it's genius that I thought of that idea, but you have to commit to something. You see something, it's an idea, you commit to it and you go for it. The difference between good and great is quite dramatic. Then I thought, well, how cool would it be to actually get a dramatic picture of this guy with sunlight coming through a window and then a dark background? This is what you call Rembrandt lighting. Rembrandt lighting, people just think it's just three-quarter lighting and the shadow on the side of the face. Rembrandt lighting is either one eye or both eyes are in shadow, and you usually get a triangular piece of light in the face. In this case, it's very masculine. It's what we consider more Rembrandt lighting. It's a masculine quality of light. Now, what Chris did before, he put his hand over his face, emulating the mask that the Phantom wore. I thought, perfect. Normally, I would put both the couple in a pocket of light. Let me suggest his presence and have him just there. Do you see how we can see a hint of him there? But the metaphor of that opera gave me the idea to actually have him there. He's almost wearing a mask of shadow, don't you think? It's suggestive. And that's what I love about the idea of doing these kinds of things. Hopefully, you're starting to think about photography maybe in a little bit of a different way. Hoping that I've given you two perspectives. One is, the next time you see pockets of sunlight, you'll treat them differently, look at them differently. The next time you walk past a silver piece of metal reflecting off sun, what are you going to think of? Make sense? The next time you see a glow of light coming underneath a stairrail, what are you going to think of? The next time you walk past a street with a big sign of a Hollywood movie poster, but there's floods of light coming through, what are you going to think of? The next time you see the sun setting and you're on a hill, what are you going to think of? So not only do I want, hopefully, that what we've taught you today, giving you specific ideas, it's unlocking the principles behind recognizing triggers in your environment and maximizing them in a way perhaps that you've never seen before. And guess what? It's a lot of fun, and you can sell a lot of it because you're creating something incredible. Hope you enjoyed that, guys.